Are you called to Christian ministry? In this brief video, I would like to share 2 scriptures with you and 2 personal stories. The first scripture is from Colossians 4:17. The Apostle Paul says, "Take heed to the ministry which you have received in the Lord, that you fulfill it." That became a life verse for me when I was a college student. I went to a Christian college, but I was not a Christian. Most days I was an agnostic when I was in a good mood. Occasionally I was a little ornery and I was an atheist and I would argue with everybody, but that was rare. A few days I tried out the New Age movement and I thought I was God, but that didn't work out. So I went back to my agnosticism and skepticism. After debating with everybody, I finally came to faith. Well, then I had to wrestle with God's calling on my life. And that's when this verse became so critical to me, to fulfill the ministry that God had called me to do. I had heard a speaker that was very influential in my life. He said, all are called to ministry. That's very, very biblical. But some are set aside to focus on preaching and teaching and ministry. That's why there are elders in the Bible to be assisted by the deacons so that they can focus on Christian ministry. Well, I had that passion as I was studying Scripture. I had that vision for wanting to make a difference in the world, and that verse guided me to focus on going into Christian ministry. A second scripture verse that was very influential in my life was Galatians 4:19. In fact, it related greatly to a calling on my life just a few years ago. In Galatians 4:19, the Apostle Paul says, "My little children, with whom I am in the pains of childbirth until Christ is formed in you." That's a critical verse for understanding Paul's ministry. Yes, he was going around the Mediterranean trying to bring people to Christ. But it's also clear that he wasn't just trying to get them merely to go to heaven, he wanted them to be fit for heaven. As John Wesley put it, we don't want people to merely get to heaven, we want them to be fit for heaven. The Apostle Paul wanted to see the individuals that he was ministering to become Christ-like in this life. Well, in 2012, I had an opportunity that came my way. My wife and I were up in the great state of Ohio, which is known as Satan's Kingdom by our friends in Michigan, and we were loving what we were doing. We loved students, we loved teaching, we loved the administrative roles that we had at a Christian college, but someone had nominated me for the provost position at Asbury Theological Seminary. Perhaps this calling in my life can be of assistance to you. When I first heard about the position and got the job description, I wrote back and said, I don't think I really line up with the position. But they kept encouraging me to put my name in the hat, and one thing led to another. And finally, it looked like there were 2 finalists, and I was probably going to be the top finalist. Well, we had moved up to Ohio to be near our parents who had health issues, cancer, heart disease, a number of things, and we thought it would be a good time for us to be close to them. And here was this possible call to Asbury Theological Seminary. Well, what do we do? How do we make that decision? How do we know God's call on our life? Well, we decided to have a talk with my parents and let them know that I was a likely candidate and we were prayerfully considering the position at Asbury Seminary. And as we were talking, my mom obviously was a little bothered that we might move further away in the twilight years. Indeed, she passed away about 1.5 years after we moved to Wilmore. And my dad responded very interestingly. He said, "Asbury?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Asbury Theological Seminary?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Just a minute, I received a letter just the other day about Asbury Seminary." Of course, I thought, oh, now what's happened here? Has Asbury contacted, has the president contacted my parents and asked them what type of a kid I was? Because that might not play out very well. I did not grow up on the right side of the spiritual tracks. Well, my father came back down and he had in his hand a letter he had just received. The letter came from his brother's sister. His brother had passed away about a decade prior. His daughter was going through the attic of her father and found a number of boxes and found a picture. The picture is what she put in an envelope and sent it to my dad and said, "Hey, would you want this picture?" Well, my dad looked at the picture and on the back there was a description. Here is the picture. This picture is from 1923. These are 5 United Methodist ministers sitting on the Balancing Rock near Chattanooga, Tennessee. And guess what they're doing? They're on a southeastern United States tour raising money for the founding of Asbury Theological Seminary. Well, that caught my dad's attention. He's a statistician, and it helped my family to embrace this calling. And it's important to know this is more than just a story about me or about my life. What were these ministers up to? These are United Methodist ministers. There are a ton of Methodist seminaries and training institutes and colleges in 1923, one right down the road from my grandfather. They were raising money to found Asbury Theological Seminary because there was a type of ministry that Asbury was going to promote that they believed in. You know the motto, the whole Bible for the whole world. What did that mean? To these Methodist ministers, it meant that many of the seminaries were drifting. They weren't under biblical authority, and they weren't emphasizing the great heritage of radical transformation in this life. And so what they wanted to say is they wanted to take the whole Bible under biblical authority, the whole Bible, meaning not just getting saved or merely getting to heaven, as Wesley said was inappropriate, but the whole Bible of being completely transformed in this life and being fit for heaven. And so this grand vision of ministry is what caught my attention and caused my wife and I to conclude that God was calling us to Asbury Seminary in order to join this grand vision. So what I would suggest to you as you are searching God's will for your life, that you think about the bigger vision, about how God has put a passion in your heart and how God has confirmed that through external individuals, and how you have a love for God's great work in the world.